Before we start, Les, I just have to know how's the crawfish doing?
It's dead.
Oh, when you found it, it was dead?
Yeah.
So for those that don't follow Les's Facebook page, Les found a dead miniature lobster in his yard yesterday. And have we figured out how it got there?
Yeah. It turns out Robolites has a pond.
Okay.
Kenny.
Yeah, yeah, of course. It's across the street.
Well, how did the crawfish cross the street? Or why did the crawfish cross the street? That's the question.
I don't know. This reminds me of some sort of
Oh, that's so sad. I have a pond and I have turtle. I don't know crawfish, but I have a turtle, and I'm very careful to make sure the turtle doesn't escape the yard.
yeah, okay. Yeah.
I guess it's also, I mean, he also has cats, so it's possible a cat grabbed it and
Oh
then
yeah.
brought it over. But my dogs usually keep cats out of the yard. But anyway.
Well, whatever it is, Richard, don't let your turtles get to Les's yard because that's a sure way of them dying.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And Les, as I mentioned, Leviticus, I hope you weren't considering on making it into dinner.
No, no, no.
Okay. All right, everybody. Enough of Les's crawfish story. Uh, And we're back to chapter 17, the second half of what we began last week. Um, I'll admit that the text here is a little bit difficult. You've got to kind of rearrange the words in order to understand the message. That's part of poetry, right? But sometimes some of them are just straight out, very clear, kind of almost linear. But here we've got to skip around, and so that's going to be a little challenging today with our understanding of the simple meaning or the contextual meaning of the text. But let's begin. So Megan, would you like to start us off with 14 to 20?
To start a quarrel is to open a sluice. Before a dispute flares up, drop it. To acquit the guilty and convict the innocent, both are an abomination to God. What good is money in the hand of a fool to purchase wisdom when that person has no mind? A person is devoted at all times. A sibling is born to share adversity. Devoid of sense are people who give their hand to stand surety for their fellows. One who loves transgression loves strife. One who builds a high threshold invites broken bones. Crooked minds come to no good, and the double-tongued fall into trouble. Ooh.
Okay. So talk about being double-tongued. This is hard to. So what are people what are the initial reactions, comments, questions that people are feeling here?
It seems pretty clear, although there is a sense of stopping things before they get out of hand.
So you see that in the first verse, right?
Yeah.
You see that in other verses as well?
Um, well, don't.
Maybe in the to stand surety for their fellows.
Yeah, and don't give money to a fool because the fool doesn't have a brain anyway.
Right. So initially, I thought this section was kind of directed toward court issues. I'm not sure that's the case, but certain ones. But yeah, in Pirkei Avot, in the chapters of the fathers, it says Ezahu Chacham, who's the wise person? Haro'et Anolad, who sees what's about to happen. Yeah, be able to to look ahead.
And also, there's a lawyer involved because if the threshold's too high and somebody breaks their bones, they're going to be sued.
Yeah, right. So, and do we think that's what that means? Threshold as in the simple meaning of the text? Like how do we imagine that?
Well, I read it literally, but
Yeah.
I'm pretty literal.
How does that connect to the verse before, or it's for the line before, which is the same verse? Okay, so that was, so that's one of the questions. Rita Claire, did you want to say something?
Myself. I would say there are some people who just love a good argument and somehow or another enjoy causing problems. I don't know if any of us know anybody like that, but unfortunately, there is some people who are that way.
And where in the words do you see that?
He said, one who loves transgression loves strife.
Uh-huh.
I see
Anything
it in-
else?
oh,
Yes,
I
go
see
ahead,
it
Megan.
I see it in the first two lines. It's sort of, to start a quarrel is to open up a sluice. Before a dispute flares up, drop it. It's like, think before you talk.
Mhm.
Should I say it now? And then what's interesting to me is right in the middle of all of this, a friend is devoted at all times, a sibling is born to share adversity. So it's sort of all of us get caught in these different things, but we have a friend and a sibling sort of balance us out,
Mhm.
maybe.
Yeah. Malka?
I just have a question about how they got to the English in the first line.
Okay.
Potem Mayim Reshit Madun. I don't understand how that translates to start a quarrel is to open a sluice.
Yeah, so poter, so
Mhm.
that's why you've got to, poter is to open something,
Right.
okay?
Mayim?
Yeah, so mime is water, so poter
Right.
is to unleash water.
Oh, okay.
So you have to assume, that's why I say you gotta, we need to be very flexible with the order of the words here. In other words, it could be Reshit Madon, hu hapoter mayim, right?
Okay.
The beginning of an argument is the one who lets the water go flow. And
Okay.
and it seems that most of the commentators agree that this is the direction. They have different ways of getting there. Especially since the second line kind of is explanatory for that, right?
Mhm.
Before dispute flares up, draw it.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, Natosh, yeah, this would be a great thing to put above people's monitors, for their email, right? Think of, don't send it, wait until tomorrow, that rule that I was never really good at. But yeah. Yeah, waiting, yeah. And we're gonna see in the next section as well, this idea of sometimes to be quiet is the best. It's the best way to move forward on everything, on anything. Anything else? Yes, Harold and then Eileen. Just need you to unmute first, Harold.
There we go. I don't understand the meaning of the two lines, starting with devoid of sense. So devoid of sense are people who give their hand. To me, giving hand means to offer assistance, to give their hand, to stand surety for their fellows. I don't understand quite what surety means, safety or certainty.
So in this case, it's almost a terminus technicus. It's a surety is giving an aruba is to a
Co-signing a loan.
Cosine.
to give,
Right.
there's another word for it, to give security to. In any case, yeah, we had this once. You may remember it was way back in chapter 6. There was a larger bit about not doing this, and which is contrary to what we think, right? You should do this. We had a little discussion about, how where we need to be as friends, as people who support other people. How can you possibly get a loan if you don't have anybody to co-sign? And yet the author or a number of the Psalms a number of the Proverbs are warning us against this. So so the whole thing of giving the hand is part of the process, the legal process of offering surety. Now, devoid of sentiment, in other words, those people are fools. They're fools because you're just going to get into trouble. And it does, it kind of connects to the first verse as well, about looking beforehand to see that you may be doing this out of the good of your heart, out of compassion, but then it's going to bring you down as well from a financial point of view. So maybe in that context we see that, as opposed to just a general rule, don't
Okay.
lend. Eileen?
The two lines, a friend is devoted at all times, a sibling is born to share adversity. I read that the line blood is thicker than water comes from this, but I don't quite see it. I mean,
You mean you read it, you saw it in a commentary, or you understood it?
no, I read it in a commentary.
Yeah. He doesn't see it that way. Fox sees it as two lines that complement each other. So friends devoted all times, and the sibling that is, so there's a re'ah and there's an ach, right? One is a blood relationship. A re'ah is one who is a re'ah is one who's devoted, and brothers, siblings are part of your tzuris. They're part of your tzuris. So devotion, they share the experience, the difficult experience you're having. So it's not comparing that one's more strong than the other. And that way, blood is thicker, I don't think applies. They're parallel statements. They're synonymous statements.
Thank you.
So it's not a positive about the sibling?
It is positive. In other words, while it is a comparison that a friend, there's an issue of choice, but you don't choose your siblings, kind of a thing. They share in any kind of pain you're having, they will share with you. That's a good thing.
So I read it as a really good friend is like a brother or sister.
Yeah, also could be read. I don't think the two things contradict each other.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, but I thought somebody was just sort of saying that from your siblings you'll get tzuris.
No. I think there is an interpretation like that, but Fox doesn't go with it. I think instead it's in the same way that a friend is devoted, your siblings will share your tzuris with you. Not that you'll get it from them, you'll share, and that's why the ach litzara yivaled. It could be, the Hebrew could also mean what you would the Hebrew said he was born to make tzuris for you. That would be a literal translation, but I don't think that's the spirit of it. Although, you know what? Again, I only have time to delve into so many midrashim. I'm wondering if there isn't some midrash that applies this to David or somebody in their brother, David's sons and the brothers, Avshalom, whatever. There was a lot of, or Joseph and his brothers, who knows? Like
Or David and Jonathan for the friend part.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if there's such a midrash. I didn't see one, but that's my intuition would say. So, Madalena, you're saying so like they carry the load with you. Yes, yeah. They share the burden of the difficult time with you. Yeah. Okay. So let's go back to the top and let's see if what we understand. I think we said enough about the first two lines, and anybody wants to, this idea of being able to see what's about to happen beforehand. Then there's something rather obvious: to acquit the guilty, to convict the innocent is kind of right out of Deuteronomy 25. That you shouldn't distinguish, as a judge should not distinguish between poor and rich. Then there's this business. What good is money in the hand of a fool to purchase wisdom? So I had thought of it being symbolic from the beginning, right? A fool is a fool and can't really learn, doesn't have the capacity, the ability to gain wisdom, because we would say today, that's their DNA. That's the way their mind is structured. They're just not able to get it for whatever issue, whatever reason. but some of the commentators here suggested perhaps it's actually talking about tuition, right? You could pay all you want to a teacher, but if you're full, you're still not gonna get it. So whether it's symbolic or whether it's literal, to purchase wisdom, that both of them make sense. I would go for the symbolic. Okay, and this, one who loves transgression, loves strife, kind of goes back to the top as well. In other words, if you're looking for, I'm one who was accused often in my younger years of that I live for the confrontation. That's kind of looking back on it, I feel that all the confrontations that I got into were around ideological issues. It was around the ordination of women. It was around LGBTQ rights. It was around outreach to HIV/AIDS. It was had to do with other socioeconomic things. It was less so when I was in Israel, so much with having to do with Palestinian rights. That's something I left that for others. There were plenty of rabbis that were involved in that, so I focused on what I did. And in almost every time when this came issues to change policy, what people did and what somebody's doing right now, people are doing now with showing this film on Shabbat, a disturbing email reached the organizers, our host at the cultural center, is to demonize. In other words, well, he's a divisive person. He loves controversy. That's the way to deflect it, right? You don't have to deal with the issue. Once you've decided that the person is bringing up the issue, in my case, when I was not as calm as I am today, and you guys, I'm pretty calm today compared to, is to say, well, it's a form of demonization, of othering, right? It's once somebody said to me, it's not what you say, David, it's how you say it. Okay, I said, all right, now that I've said it, but how about the issue? Okay, let's get past, now how about the issue itself? It's just it's a way to defer, a way to deflect. Comments? Okay, so then we get to this high threshold business. He's got a lot of it. I don't entirely understand it. The point that he's making is that that in other wisdom traditions, there is this idea of somebody who has a tall doorway, and that is something ostentatious. And so Fox chooses to see this as one who builds a tall, ostentatious house, because when people come in, they see the doorway, a fancy doorway, a expensive door, whatever. He's the person who is inviting people to do him harm. Now, Les was thinking, or however it was, I think it was Les that says, you break, if you've got a high threshold, it's like, well, first of all, that's the sill is the top part, right? Threshold is the bottom part. And so Fox says really what we're talking about is the sill. The word here in Hebrew is ptacho, which is the petach, is the opening, the door, the entrance. To say threshold, there's another word for that, the saf, and he would say that. In other words, he says that's not what the Hebrew text says. The Hebrew text says opening has to do with being ostentatious. I think they went for threshold because the idea is that you trip over maybe there's a raised part of the threshold as you trip them, and then you're going to break your bones going in and have that
When they talk about like Yom Kippur Pituach or Pituli, is that an opening or is it actually the gate, the door that closes the opening?
So the best way to explain that would be that word, that piyut, that very simple poem that we say during Ni'ilah, which is the closing, the locking of the door. Ptach lanu shar be'et ni'ilat shar. Open for us the gate at this time of closing the gate. So ptach is the verb to open. A petach, the noun taken from that verb, is the opening. Shar is literally a gate. Right, shar, delit is a door,
So at least the Hebrew is pointing to the opening, not
and not to the threshold necessarily. It
either the sides or the bottom
Yeah,
or the
the
top.
reason that the difference, the key difference here is that if you understand it to be the opening itself and you take into consideration ancient wisdom literature from other nations, which we haven't done a lot of, that's not my expertise. And there's another time with another part of Proverbs, we're going to do that. We're going to have a lot of comparisons with. It's later on in the book. But if you take that into consideration, and there already is a proverb that says, the one who builds his doorway high a certain amount, so high, way higher than you need, is the person who's asking for trouble because he's building in such an ostentatious way. It's kind of like saying people that build houses in a certain way in Beverly Hills or or here or in the movie colony, right? They're almost asking to be robbed the way they built the house. It shows that there's got to be wealth in the inside, and people are making a statement, right? And doorways make a statement. That's an interesting thing. I've never designed a house. We've never, we have a flat, which is an apartment building that we didn't design. We bought from other people, and the doors are pretty uniform they're extremely uniform. The difference is can you afford to have one of those fancy spider lock kinds of things, the iron doors that people can't break into? That's the only difference. But when you look at houses, I was in Beverly Hills the other day. I had an event in Westwood, and it's like I haven't driven down those streets so much. You drive slow, you're driving 25, and I'm always looking for the mezuzahs. I don't know if you guys do the same thing. You see so many doorways there, but you see doorways, you see entranceways, which are very grandiose. That's making a statement to people, right? That's before coming into your house, what you're going to think of somebody. So I think that's how Fox goes with this. Yet you could leave it at the literal meaning, which has nothing to do with being ostentatious, has to do with being with seichel. Don't build your house in a way that somebody's going to trip and fall and break their bones, which may mean more to the folks here in Palm Springs than the other one. I don't know. Kelly, the owner of Gray Coffee House, where we do our things, she has a lovely book called The Doors of Palm Springs. I don't know if anybody's ever seen the book. It's a coffee table book. It's sold in a number of the stores, especially in PSP. But it's actually her book, and she's done very well with that book. But it's a really interesting book about doorways, right? I always take pictures of doorways in different parts of the world and send them to her. I think it's an interesting thing to think about. How does somebody design a doorway? It's the first thing you see when you're coming to visit them. Okay. And then finally, we have the double-tongued fall into trouble, the nepach bil shono. So hafuch is opposite, is turned over. Lashon is tongue, but also speaking. Twisted tongue. Tongue twister, we think of something that's hard to pronounce, right? But in the Dead Sea Scrolls, there's a term that they're using in code, the Dead Sea Scroll people, against the Pharisees, who became the rabbis of the Talmud, and they call them Dorshei HaChalokot, the ones which would be the smooth talkers. And is there not like a Native American term for how the white people spoke as well? Something? Anybody? A kind of a parallel term?
Fork tongue.
Fork
Fork tongue.
Fork tongue. So what does a fork tongue mean?
eyes.
Lies. So this feels like the same kind of a thing, right?
Could it be sort of two-faced? Two-faced? Although it refers to tongue, not the face, but maybe
But
that's
it could be the same principle. It could be, yeah. There's another term which I think is rabbinic. I don't think it's. I wonder if it's in Proverbs. So many things I'm finding out in Proverbs this year, studying with you guys, that I thought maybe were rabbinic literature, but they're biblical. There's a term that's actually used quite a bit in modern Hebrew, achad b'feh, achad b'lev. One in the mouth, one in the heart. In other words, he says one thing with his mouth, but the heart is saying something different. Yeah. Fork tongue. Does anybody know the etymology? So one of us will look up that. That'll be an interesting.
A
a snake has a forked tongue.
Okay.
Snake, probably the devil. I mean, I don't know if that's where it comes
Right,
from.
or Nachash,
Snake.
and also in Hebrew culture, Nachash is somebody's a devious person based on on the begin Genesis story in Genesis. Yeah, interesting.
It says, I looked it up, snakes and lizards have forked tongues. And yeah.
Okay. All right then. Anything else before we get to the rabbinic literature? Okay. Dan, you with us today, or in spirit, or just in name?
I'm gonna have to cut out early, so it's probably best I don't read today.
Okay, even now?
Yeah, I'm leaving in a few minutes. Yeah.
All right. Anyway, good to see your picture.
Okay.
Okay then. Les, why don't you give this a try? Midrash Sifrei Devarim is a Tanaitic midrash, the book of Deuteronomy. So it's from the time of the Mishnah, first few centuries of the Common Era. Also a little bit twisted in the order of the language, but let's go ahead.
And just as learning is greater than doing, so is its punishment. In other words, that for not learning is greater than doing.
Or
As
not doing. No, not learning is greater than not doing.
And not doing. Oh, okay. All right. Great. Okay. So learning is greater than doing. Its punishment, not learning, is greater than not doing. As it is written, freeing oneself from water, Torah, is the beginning of punishment.
Okay, let's just stop here for a second. So this is a totally different way of understanding it in a very, very a midrashic sense, right? This has nothing to do with stopping to think before you cause an argument. This has to do with this is there's a lot of talk about the fact that, first of all, that there's a debate in rabbinic literature that what was more important, doing or learning, and it goes both ways, because you have to learn. If you don't learn, then you won't be able to do in the future. But of course, for those who say doing, I'm oversimplifying the debate, of course, but doing, well, what's the point of learning if you're not going to do it? So the answer, of course, is both. And here in that an extension of that conversation utilizes another common theme or device in rabbinic literature, which is to compare Torah with water. Just as water flows everywhere, Torah flows everywhere. Just as every plant, every human, everybody needs water, everybody needs Torah. It's life-giving, etc. So that's what's behind here. And then, but the interesting thing is to use this here, Poter Mayim, if you stop, it's kind of, I think the idea is if you well, how do they translate it? If you free yourself, not poter, you're not poter the mayim, you don't free the water, you free yourself. One who frees himself from water, that is Torah, that's the beginning of a quarrel. Okay, well, go ahead.
Can we go back for a second? I'm lost in the double negatives.
Yeah.
So can you translate? I mean,
yes. Let me go to the Hebrew for a second. I will translate directly from the Hebrew. We'll see if that's any better. Just need a sec.
I mean, the way I would interpret the English is it's better to learn than to do.
Yeah, that's the first part. In other words, that's taking the side of the ones in the argument that say it's better to learn something than to do the mitzvah. It's better to learn about the mitzvah than to do the mitzvah. And the background to that is those people that say, because you have to learn in order to do, right? It's kind of like saying, if you've got 1 hour, what are you going to do? And you're just a beginner, first learn, and then you'll know to do afterwards. And then the other side of the argument is, no, it's better to do, because why else? What do you need to learn for? If you're not going to do it, what's the point of learning it?
But there's also another thing in here, is that if you do something without learning it, you're just doing it by rote. It has no meaning. So therefore, it's more important to learn before you actually do.
Okay, yeah, I'm not sure that, yeah, is that part of the argument? Yeah, I'm not sure if that's recorded as well, but certainly that would make sense in our understanding it. So I'm looking at the Hebrew now. Open. Everything's going slow. All right.
You know, otherwise you get into these situations where why are you doing that? And you go, well, my ancestors did it. Well, why'd they do it? Well, their ancestors did it. And so now you're doing something just because, well, it was just done and there's no reason behind it.
Okay, so it says like this in the Hebrew, Ukeshem she'anash al ha-Talmud yoter min ha-maaseh, kach natan sachar al ha-Talmud yoter min ha-maaseh. And in the same way that someone is punished for not learning enough, more than for not doing enough, so that's a single negative, right? You got that, Les? Right? I
Say that
can't.
again. Can you say that again?
Yeah. In the same way that one is punished for not studying enough, more than one is punished in the same way that one is punished for not studying enough more than for not doing enough, right? The punishment is, that's the dictum. Punishment for not studying is greater than the punishment for not doing. So too, the reward for study is more than the reward for doing. That's the section that comes before this. Okay. Now, yeah, no, that's the section itself. That's just I think a better translation than.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then it says, as it is written, Shinemar v'lematem otam. Oh, this is different. Something. Translation is not reflecting the Hebrew here. Wow. That's odd. I cut and paste from the English translation of the Sifrei, but the Hebrew that's placed above it when you have both is not that. It's something else. It's a little bit different. I'm guessing the English translation is based on another manuscript. Okay, so in any case, so as it is written, freeing oneself from water doesn't mean freeing the water. It means freeing oneself from the study of water, the study of Torah, which is water. That's the beginning of the punishment. And just as the punishment for not, yeah, and just as the punishment for not learning is greater than for not doing, so is its reward greater than that for doing. I mean, I think we're getting a little bit too much into the weeds here, but basically all it's trying to say is that this is a proof of a point in the debate between what's more important to study or to do, and it's more important to study, not just because the punishment is greater for not studying, for avoiding study than for avoiding to do. That's
Is it also saying that if you don't study, you won't know what the right thing to do is?
No, that's what we understand, but this is part of a greater thing. So I guess my pedagogical mistake here is bringing something that is a tip of the iceberg of a greater conversation in rabbinic literature about the tension between studying and doing. What's more important? I jumped to the end by saying they're both important. Yeah.
But wouldn't we in the modern era say it's that you're going to be judged on what you do, not by what you learn?
Yeah. Okay.
Actions speak louder than words.
Yeah, so there's another aspect of it, but then you can go back and say, yes, but how will you know what to do if you don't study?
Well, that's what I said before. So
Yeah, it's tautological. I think that's what that's called, right? It's circular. Look, I just had a conversation with an old friend of mine who's a journalist, and we were talking about how, you know, I had friends who were journalists in the aughts, in the mid aughts in Israel, quite a few, in the late 90s, from the late 90s onwards, and we would get into debates about different things, and often I would say in a way too disrespectful and arrogant way, I would say to them, you know, being a journalist is not fixing the world. being out there and doing stuff, that's what fixes the world. Now, of course, I know now, and I probably knew that then as well, but I was being arrogant, is that it takes both things. You need to write about it, you need to read about stuff, but you need to do. So, you know, we talk so much. I just came off of a Zoom call about some particular issue now of democracies, rabbinic involvement in the saving democracy issue, and that has to do with migration issues, has to do with everything. It has to do with Israel, that we want to raise awareness. So let's take an example of the Shabbat. We want to raise awareness to a particular issue that's happening in the state of Israel, Palestine, for many, many years, for decades now. Certainly this particular issue, this particular case, slice of it, is happening since the 1980s. And this is a more than a snapshot. It's a series of clips from reality on the ground about something now. Now, does this change the situation in Israel, Palestine? No, but it does raise awareness amongst both Jews and Christians here, or others that will come to this screening and be part of the discussion. It raises awareness to this issue, which influences how people speak about it. Speaking is on the way to doing stuff, and could influence how people donate their money, how people vote. Now, given we're not Israelis, but if you have how could it influence deeds? Let's say voting. Let's say there's two candidates. We're going to make it easy. In the Democratic Party right now, I don't exclude the Republican Party, but just to make it easy, let's say there's a Bernie Sanders kind of candidate who says, "Listen, we have to stand for our principles, even if it's Israel who's the bad guy here," or we have somebody who is absolutely embracing of Israel and says that's not for us to decide. And how about the others and all the different arguments? Well, we're going to vote for. Hopefully we're going to vote for one. That's so study does have to do with what you do, right? But if all you do and you don't study, you don't grow, then you're stuck. You're stuck. So if I've got people that talk about conservative Judaism. Again, this is my adventures the last few days and going to the ordination of the rabbinical school in Los Angeles, and some people speak about conservative Judaism as if nothing's changed in the last 30 years, or people speak about Zionism as if nothing's changed the last 30 years. Stuff has been written, studies have been done, there's reality on the ground, instead of repeating the things that were said for decades beforehand. So it's a combination of both things, I think. Anyway, let's just finish up the Sifrei. We're on the third line in the fourth word.
And just as the punishment for not doing is greater than that for not doing, not learning is greater than that for not doing, so is its reward greater than that for doing. As it is written, and you shall teach your sons to speak in them the words of Torah, so that your days be prolonged in the days of your children, etc. And Psalms, and he gave them the lands of nations, and they inherited the toil of peoples, so that they keep, in other words, learn his statutes and heed his laws.
Okay, so verses, proof texts that show that learning Torah is a source of good life, of long life, right? That's the reward, and it's the reward here in this world, not in the world to come, by the way. So that would kind of avoid the thing that you brought up, Les, about, well, aren't you judged upon your actions? Maybe at the end of days, when you die, then you're judged more on your actions than how much you learned. But the rabbis actually want to say, no, learning is the most important part of life. That was their culture. That's their chidush. That's their novel idea that is not a biblical idea as much as it is a rabbinic idea. As in the same re-understanding of biblical literature that went in the direction of Christianity, where it's about love, or about the things that the church was standing for, at least purported to stand for. It took a different approach. I would say all those things are good things to do, but we have to see the context of rabbinic literature was there to promote their deal, their thing. Their thing was Torah study.
Isn't that the argument being given for not drafting yeshiva students into the Israeli military?
Certainly part of it. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So, Eileen, you want to do Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud Sanhedrin 6b?
Sure. Rabbi Shimon ben Mensara says, if two litigants come before you for a judgment, before you hear their respective statements and claims, or after you hear their statements, but you do not yet know where the judgment is leaning, meaning that it is not yet clear to the judge which party is in the right, you are permitted to say to them, go out and meditate.
No, mediate, right?
Mediate.
So it's like in the TV shows and in the movies where the judge says, talk to each other. You have until tomorrow. I want this off my docket, that kind of a thing. And you can do that as long as there's no direction of how the trial's going. This is speaking to the judge now. Okay? But go ahead.
But after you hear their statements and you know where the judgment is leaning, you are not permitted to say to them, go out and mediate. As it is stated, the beginning of strife is as when one releases water. Therefore, leave off contention before the quarrel breaks out. Rabbi Shimon ben Menassar interprets the verse to mean, before the resolution of the contention is revealed, you can cast it off. Once the resolution of the contention is revealed, you cannot cast it off.
Cast it off, meaning you can't pursue further conversation. Meetings, again, I left a meeting not too long ago that I felt that whatever decision was going, then the person who had a different idea kept at it, kept going, kept the conversation alive, kind of thing. And here it's addressing the person who's in charge of the judgment process. In other words, don't keep, which is a little bit counterintuitive today, right? We would say, listen, please continue. If you don't like the idea, continue. Please talk to me. Let's talk it out. Whatever. That's more of a, yeah. That's not being encouraged here. What's being encouraged here is once you know something is going in a different direction, then actually shut down the conversation about it. And we can take it out or leave it, but this is a slightly different way than what we understood it, I think, in the beginning. Okay, and that was on verse 14, on the words that have to do with a price in the hand of the fool to buy wisdom. Why don't you read another one, Eileen?
Rabbi Shmuel Bar Naamani said that Rabbi Yonatan said, what is the meaning of that which is written? Why is there a price in the hand of a fool to buy wisdom, as he has no heart? This expresses the following sentiment. Woe to them, haters of Torah scholars, a euphemism for the Torah scholars themselves, who immerse themselves in Torah and have no fear of heaven. They are fools. They try to acquire the wisdom of Torah, but since they have no fear of heaven in their hearts, they lack the ability to do so.
Yeah, so a little bit hard to understand because why are they using a euphemism like that? Why not just say the Torah scholars? Why call them the hater of Torah scholars? So there's something called Lashon Sagi Nahor, which means language, which is the language of a seeing blind person. Two things that contradict each other. And I don't know culturally where it stems from, if it has to do with evil eye, superstition. I'm not really sure. But when I looked in the commentaries to the Talmud in Rabbeinu Alfasi, the Rif, I think 10th century, maybe Italy, don't remember exactly. His paraphrase of this, he leaves out the hater. He just calls them Torah scholars. So that's the meaning here. And so what does it have to do with? If they try, if the foolishness here is not an inability to process intellectually, the foolishness here is a lack of fear of God, a lack of humility. So if all you do is study and you're going to try to get ahead on the ladder that way, but you don't realize what the study is for in order to perfect this world and to know where your place is as a human being, then you're bound to fail at it. I think that's the bottom line of this Talmudic passage. Okay. So let's go to 2128. Richard, you want to read?
One begets a dullard to one's own grief. The father of a villain has no joy. A joyful heart makes for good health. Despondency dries up the bones. The wicked draw bribes out of their bosom to prevent the course of justice. Wisdom lies before the intelligent. The eyes of dullards range to the ends of the earth. A stupid son is a vexation for his father, and a heartache for the woman who bore him. To punish an innocent is surely not right, or to flog the great for their uprightness. One who is knowledgeable in sparing words, a man of understanding, is reticent. Even fools who keep silent are deemed wise, intelligent while their mouth is shut.
Okay. Comments?
Well, I like the last two lines.
Yeah. Silence is golden,
Yeah.
but my eyes still see. Okay, anything else? So there's,
It's interesting that
Flogged are great for their uprightness. Can you explain that one?
so the verse starts in the line before, Gam anosh letzadik lo tov.
Mm-hmm.
Even the punishment or the punishing of an innocent person is not good,
Right.
but to hit, to flog, right?
Mm-hmm.
Someone who is a nadiv is a generous person. Here it says great.
Mm-hmm.
For their uprightness is all the more worse, all the worse.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, we have a number of these kinds of sayings. This is not good, but this is worse. This is
Okay.
good, but this is better. And
Mm-hmm.
this is good, but this is worse. This is bad, but this is worse.
Why is that worse?
Because they're innocent.
I
No, the innocent part I get, right?
think
Or
the innocent
the
are simple.
flogged are great for their uprightness.
Yeah, I
Why is
think
that
I
worse?
understand is the innocent are simple people, and there's a certain class distinction here, but the Nevi'im are leaders.
Okay.
That's how I would understand it, and then I think that makes some sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
We may not like the sense, right, in our egalitarian way of looking at things.
Right.
this
But
section
these
also,
two lines are saying the same thing. To punish the innocent is wrong, and to punish the uprightness or the righteous is wrong. To flog, it just says to flog is a punishment. To flog the great, or to flog, it's to punish. And then it says or. Does it say or in Hebrew also?
No, it doesn't say or. See, that's inferred. So you could read it as or you could read it as more than or worse
Oh,
than,
okay.
less than. Yeah, yeah.
it also goes back and forth between people who are wicked and people who are stupid.
Right.
And that they're sort of smart and wicked versus just stupid and dull.
There's a lot of judgment here, right? This is all about judging the people around you. So let's take it from the first lines. There's he has a comment here, Fox, about there's this line and there's one further down about the parents, right? This one is Yoled Ksil, that Yoled is a male, right? So the man giving birth to, the man who begets is the word in Hebrew, right? A man who begets a dullard, the father who begets a dullard is only has grief from it, right? And then you say, but why is this directed to the father? He doesn't have any power whether the person's going to be a dullard or not, right? Whether his offspring are be bad. So Fox prefers to see this as being directed to the children and saying, you should know your parents are embarrassed of you. It's to lay guilt on the children as to how they're behaving. Yeah, and then there's also a difference between being stupid or being foolish or than being a villain, right? So there's a step up. Then we have something about good health, right? If your heart is full of joy, then you'll have good health. There's a lot of talk about this word geha. It's not, if it doesn't look familiar to those who know the Hebrews, because this is the only place it appears in the Hebrew Bible. So some read it as health or healing, others read it as age, and others as face. So a joyful marks for a good face, right? Because it's a body part, face, as opposed to the bones in the second. If a joyful heart makes for good age, because the opposite of that is the drying up of bones, which comes with age. Yeah, and or health and age are similar here. So their belief is, ancient belief is that as you grow older, and as you grow more depressed, then your bones become more brittle. There's a direct relationship between your osteoporosis. Is that the word?
Well, I mean, there's no question that depression people who are depressed have a higher mortality from other diseases.
Right, so that what he's saying is they connected.
Psychosomatic.
They connected to the bones, actually, those, right? The bones are part of it.
Well,
Again,
that's the osteopathic view of medicine.
exactly, right. It depends. Yeah, it depends. Whoever wrote this, what kind of medicine his son was into. Yeah. My son, the osteopath. Yeah, okay. All right. It's nothing particularly novel about to pervert the course of justice. Wisdom lies in the intelligent. This one is a little strange. The eyes of those range to the ends of the earth. A stupid son is vexation for his father. I'm sorry. The wisdom lies before the intelligence, and the eyes of the dull range to the ends of the earth. In other words, the smart person sees it right away. The foolish person, he could look forever and he won't find it. I think that's what that's saying. He'll search, he'll just never get there. Then we have the repetition of kind of the first two lines, but adds the mother in it as well. It's the same idea. This kind of about punishing the innocent and flogging the upright, flogging the great for uprightness, as Malcolm brought up, we've spoken about. And then we get this last section that Richard loves so much because he loves the silence here, right? One who is knowledgeable is sparing with words, right? Chosech amarav. The chosech is to save on, to keep inside. One's words is somebody who knows. And then somebody who has yakar ruach it says a man of understanding, but yakar means honorable or respectable. It could mean valuable. So it's implied the valuable person, the respectable person, with the ruach, yeah. And that is the person who is the man, the one who has understanding.
You could reverse this and say somebody who never opens their mouth, you can't know whether they're smart or evil or stupid.
Well, that's what the
what it
third
says.
and
Yeah.
fourth line say, indeed, right? Gam mevil machish, right? Even the fools who keep their mouth shut, people assume they're wise, right? And so, intelligent are considered intelligent as long as, by the way, their mouth is shut. The minute they open their mouth, we know who they are. So let's just take a look at some of the rabbinic texts that came to mind. The one that came to mind right away, I'll show that in a second, but it's a little bit different in wording. But let's do Avot Rabbi Natan, Rabbi Malka. Avot Rabbi Natan is kind of like a Talmudic, a post-Talmudic era Talmud on the wisdom of the fathers.
Wisdom does not produce words, and words do not produce wisdom. Only action does. Anyone who talks too much brings about sin, as it says in Proverbs 10:19. When there is too much talking, there is no lack of sin. And it says in Proverbs 17:28, even a fool, if he keeps silent, is deemed wise.
Okay. Now, I immediately thought of the next thing, because so much of Pirkei Avot, we've studied it, so many of us have studied it from a young age, in between Passover and Shavuot, Pesach and Shavuot. So this is what came to my mind. But I brought the entire section from Rabbi Akiva. Go ahead, Malka.
Rabbi Akiva said, merriment and frivolity accustom one to sexual licentiousness. Tradition is a fence to the Torah, tithes a fence to wealth, vows a fence to abstinence, a fence to wisdom is silence.
So shtika siag lechokhmah.
Mm-hmm.
So-
Except for the way it's worded is chokhmah, siag lechokhmah shtika. And so go ahead, Malka.
A safeguarding fence
Oh, no,
around.
I'm sorry. Was somebody about to say, did somebody want
Oh.
to say something about this?
I was going to say
Oh,
something.
sorry. Go ahead, please.
I was going to say that sometimes, unless you have something good to say, it would be better not to say anything at all.
Right.
Mhm.
And there must be a saying about that in English, right? Also, no?
If you don't have anything good to say, don't say
You
anything
don't
at
say
all.
anything at all. Yes.
Right. Which I
Or
think-
there's the joke, if you don't have anything good to say, please sit next to me.
yeah.
Oh, dear.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. So now we're hopping to the 13th century, Berlin, Rabbeinu Yonah, who wrote the book Sha'arei Tshuva, which is a central book in the Musar literature movement, having mostly read and studied before the high holidays. And this is his commentary to Pirkei Avot, what we just read. Go ahead.
A safeguarding fence around wisdom is silence. There is a safeguarding fence for both wisdom itself and for its traits. How is it that he doesn't interpret the words of his fellow? And he says about that,
I think it's
we have not
interrupt.
heard. He says
Right.
about that, we have not heard. I
Yeah.
have not heard. And even though it is not included in silence, silence brings, sorry, someone's brings, something's here.
Silence brings to it.
I must be missing to it. Yeah. Oh, here it is. Silence brings to it. With wisdom, how is it? He does not speak in front of someone greater than him in wisdom, as one who studies in front of his teacher and sees a fit rationale should not immediately think that it is true. And he should not want to say it until his teacher has finished speaking. For if he were to do so, he would miss what his teacher will say, and he will not know the rationales of the earlier sages, as his heart will be moving and wandering from knowing their opinion. And also because of his own rationale cannot be so focused until he hears what the early scholars said, and then weigh in the scales of his intellect, which one is more proper, this one or that one. Therefore, silence for a student in front of his teacher is a safeguarding fence for wisdom. And when he finds a rationale and his teacher is still speaking, should he not be quiet? He should not open his mouth until the words of his teacher are clear and his rationale is etched into his heart, until he finishes his words and knows what the teacher taught him. And afterwards, his reasoning will be sharp and focused. And about this, Shlomo, peace be upon him, said, the fool does not desire understanding, but only to reveal his heart.
Okay, so Rabbeinu Yonah takes it in a little bit different direction. First of all, he gives a very detailed suggestion as to how students should behave before in class, right? And how many of us, or in conversations, we're talking before. If we're talking, we can't be listening, right? And even if we're listening, are we just listening, waiting for our turn to talk? That's also part of conversations, which find all over the time. So he's got some pretty solid, even though this translation is a little funky here. I'm wondering if it's just somebody who added their own translation, as opposed to an edited translation. But I think we get the picture. But he's taking it in a very different way, because the way that it appears in Proverbs is more like, you should know that, that if you want to protect your reputation, it's about the reputation. It's not about what's happening in your mind or in your heart. You want to protect your reputation. You should know that even a foolish person, if he doesn't open his mouth, people think he's smart. And so, yeah. Okay. Any comments on this or questions?
It just seems like you wouldn't have, if it seems like you could never ask a question or question anything that the teacher said, because you would first have to absorb everything, think about it, philosophize about it, and assume that the teacher's right before you would have anything ever to say or to question.
I think it more than seems like, I think that's what he's saying. I think
Mhm.
it's very different than the way most of us have been raised to be involved in the educational process.
Mhm.
I think we're raised to question. We've been
Mm.
raised to challenge.
But,
Yeah.
but I think all of us have experience where we're so much thinking about what we're going to say that
Mhm.
we're not listening to the conversation. And I mean, I do that a lot.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, Rita Claire.
I was going to say, we may listen, but do we hear? I think there's a difference between listening to someone speak, but do we hear what that person is actually saying?
I think that's what Rabbeinu Yonah is saying here.
Yeah.
That you listen, and are you really hearing? So keep listening.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for being here. I hope to see you on Shabbat or some of you I'll see tomorrow afternoon at the study at St. Paul. And just check your backyards for seafood.
And if you find a turtle wandering around, it's mine.
It's
I'll
gonna
call
be
you.
trafe, but it'll be trafe in your yard.
Yeah,
Well,
somehow my
Chris-
yard
It's not
attracts
in the
fish.
kitchen. It's not in the kitchen. It's in the pond. It's the outside. You see the pond? That's where they live.
Okay. All right, everybody. Thank you, Madalena.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for joining, everyone.
Thank you.